Welcome to Polyface Farm, the farm of many faces, where our mission is to develop emotionally, economically, and environmentally enhancing agriculture enterprises and facilitate their duplication throughout the world. We're entering our third generation as an environmentally friendly family farm, passionately promoting the reality that we can have production, profit, and pleasure along the Integrity Way. Centrally located on the western edge of Virginia's Shenandoah Valley, the farm has 100 open acres, 450 forested acres, and produces salad bar beef, pastured poultry, pastured turkey, forage-based rabbits, pigerator pork, pastured eggs, and forestry products, all the while supporting 4 full-time salaries. In the next few minutes, you'll see the main players at Polyface: Joel, Teresa, Daniel, Rachel, and Lucille, and other family, apprentices, and friends who contribute to making this a regenerative, symbiotic niche of God's creation. This is the feather net where we have 1,000 chickens in a quarter-acre circle of electrified netting. This is a fairly new material, and the netting keeps predators out and keeps the chickens in. But the beauty of this model is that it allows us to use it in symbiosis with the cows, so that we can plop this completely protected area for the chickens into an existing beef cattle, sheep, dairy, grain, hay operation, and the cows don't come in and mess up the nest boxes, which are hanging in these hoop structures. Everything is hooked together by a chain. These feed sleds are hooked together, so you just hook up to the front with the tractor and pull the whole thing at one time. The watering system is hanging right on the end of the feed sled, and that's all hooked into our pressurized water system, so there's no feed to carry, no water to carry, and enough feed volume is held there for approximately 3 weeks at a time. And then the cattle can prepare the table for the chickens so that it'll be short grass and not real long. The bottom line on the model is that one person working 7 hours a week on 5 acres can net $10,000 a year. So now we're going to move the birds up into the next paddock. What we do here is we open up, we've got 2 contiguous circles here, the old circle where they were and the new circle where we're going to move them. We move the tractor through the waste, if you will, like an hourglass, through the waste. And you notice how the birds learn very quickly, and they come right into the next paddock. See, they're already moving in here, and we move it real slow so we don't run over anybody, and just the whole thing just skids into the next paddock. The beauty of this is the chickens are always under control. They can never get lost or get away from us, and the hoop structure can't roll anywhere. Another advantage of this is that we can come right in here with the cows and graze ahead or behind this, all around this in the field, and it's already cow-proof. So now the move is essentially complete, and the whole thing has just taken us a few minutes. And the birds have a completely fresh salad bar now for the next couple, 3 days.
Here we are at the skid houses. This is where we brood the chicks the first 3 weeks of their lives. We have 2 skid houses and 2 chalets. The skid houses are 12 by 20 and the chalets are 12 by 12. We do all of our birds here, our broilers, our pullets, our turkeys. In this particular one, we have our broiler chicks. Here we are in the skid house. There's 1,000 broiler chicks here. There's a partition, as you notice, running right through the middle of the skid house. That is to part the 2 groups. So there's 500 in each section. So if they get excited or chilly or whatever reason, they don't all go to a corner and smother each other, where there's a less chance of it happening with 500 than 1,000. Here's our hover right here. The heat lamps hang down through the middle. This is to keep them warm. It keeps all the hot air in there. They like it about 95 degrees, so you can't heat a whole skid house always. These bags are to keep the more heat in. We normally don't have them on, but since it is our first batch and it's still chilly early in the season, we like to keep more heat and things in. This is our feed. We have, most of it is corn, oats, wheat, and Fertrell's NutriBalancer ration. We give them grit the first about week of their life here. That is to get their gizzard going, get them started eating solid foods. Then we have our waterer hanging over there in the corner. That we give the big waterer to them about a week after they're here because they can't reach it when they're teeny. They need something smaller. So we have gallon jugs that sit on little blocks, basically scraps, to keep them up from the bedding, so no chips, manure, dirt, whatever gets into the clean water. We put in fresh bedding after every batch when these go out, and we also clean the gallon jugs. You'll probably see those later. And you probably see no bucket here because it is gravity fed from, there's a bucket on top of this building that gravity feeds down into it. And then 3 weeks after they're in here, they go out on pasture.
Probably the signature enterprise at Polyface Farm is the pastured broiler enterprise. Every farm has its centerpiece and its ancillary enterprises, and for us, probably our centerpiece enterprise is the pastured broiler. We started this back in about 1983, in the fall of that year, and it has grown progressively since. In the first year we did about 300, and then 400, and then 800, and it has grown up to where in the year 2000 we did about 12,000 pastured broilers. And the idea here is that you're using meat chickens in portable pens, portable floorless pens, and moving them across the pasture so they get a fresh, clean salad bar every single day. They're moved away from yesterday's excrement onto today's fresh forage and fresh lounge area. And the result is that we get a bird that eats a tremendous amount of green material, a lot of small groups so there's no stress from being in a great big mob, fresh air, fresh sunshine, and green grass, and these are all things that are denied 99% of the birds in America. We make a great differentiation between pastured poultry and free-range poultry, which typically has a non-rotated yard. In wild, in the nature, everything needs to be moved, go to a fresh spot for sanitation, for good production, for cleanliness and hygiene, and fresh forage or fresh vegetable material, fresh salad bar. And so that's the idea here, is that we're moving these pens daily to a fresh salad bar. Chore time every day involves, of course, moving the pens and carrying feed and water to each pen. We don't use a machine to do this because it scares the birds and they panic and run around when you get around them with machinery and noise. And so we just walk gently from pen to pen. We keep our feed and water here close to the pens and service the pens like that. When the birds start, when they're real small, it only takes one servicing a day. The servicing takes roughly 5 minutes per pen per day. It takes 1 minute to move a pen, so we can move 50 pens in 50 minutes. Chore time just simply doesn't take that long. And to get the birds on fresh, clean salad bar every single day, the movement is certainly not the time-consuming part. And what we have then, of course, is a bird that's highly saleable and different than something that's on a non-rotated pasture. The pens are 12 feet long, 10 feet wide, and 2 feet high, which is roughly as big as we can move by hand. If you make them any bigger or heavier, then you'll get a hernia trying to move them. And so we have made them as big as is practicable to move them by themselves. If you make them smaller, then you're moving a lot fewer pens for the same procedure. And we use lumber because that's just what we have, and we've always worked with lumber. You've got 3/4 of the top is roofed. The feeder is under the roof, so if it rains, it's protected from rain runoff. The water is on the open quadrant. The open quadrant gives the birds a lot more light, and the pens are situated with the closed end running toward the weather, toward the west, so that our weather comes from the westerlies, so that protects it from the weather. And the southern aspect always has this open quadrant, so the light penetrates as far into the pen as possible. And people have made these A-frame style out of PVC pipes. The point is that you're breaking the chickens up into very small groups, highly portable pens that you can move every day very easily, and then it's enjoyable to move them rather than busting your guts trying to move a heavy pen. You can notice where we move them every day. You can see the fresh spots every day, and on a normal season it takes about 7 days for the old spot to fertilize, and of course for the new grass to come up. So that's what we talk about when we say pastured. They're on a completely fresh pasture spot, and it's that freshness that stimulates the ingestion from the bird. If they were on here, if they had all of this area for more than 1 day, they would take the ice cream the first day, and then they'd be down to liver and onions the next day, and they wouldn't ingest the amount of green material, which has the vitamins, the minerals, the carotenes, and all those things that make the poultry good. They wouldn't ingest as much of that if they were all on the same area and not moved to a fresh spot every single day. Not only that, but they would lounge in the same area, and then they'd be lounging back on this same excrement. Now the beauty of this system is, as you can see, the infrastructure, I mean, all we have are the pens, and then the byproduct of the pens moving across the pasture is fertility for the soil to grow better grass for the cows. And so one of the most exciting aspects of this whole model to us is that it allows a person to have a white-collar salaried enterprise as a complementary, non-competitive enterprise on dad and mom's farm, grandpa's farm, a neighbor's farm, a friend's farm. It's a way in for a wannabe or a young person. It's a way for an elderly farmer to have a young generation build a complementary enterprise on the existing land base without jeopardizing the existing dairy or beef or sheep or whatever the basic, the older person's enterprise is. And that's probably one of the most exciting aspects now from an agricultural aspect, is that we're seeing people do these successful pastured poultry operations on land that they either rent or have some access to. You don't have to own it. You can start your agricultural life, and what a great office to work in. You can start that without owning any land at all. We run about 500 broilers per 1 acre. In other words, these chickens come out as about 14 to 15 to 16 days old, depending on season, weather, those kinds of things. And then they're moved every day. So in the course of that 5-week period, we dress them at 8 weeks. So in the course of that period, every 500 birds will cover roughly 1 acre. So for 12,000 birds, we need roughly 24 acres. And we start the season sometime, we can come out with chicks here in Virginia. Of course, every part of the country is a little bit different, but here in the Shenandoah Valley, we can usually come out with chickens, the first batch about the 2nd week in April, something like that. And then we conclude with the very last batch about the 1st week in October before it really turns cold. So that's the way the season progresses, and it's completely seasonal. The 6 months of wintertime, then, we have no pastured broilers at all. Everything shuts down, so it's a 6 months on, 6 months off, And during that 6-month period, at 500 birds per acre, at a net of $3 per bird, that gives us a net profit of $1,500 per acre in the 6-month period. So this is a means of where just covering very small acreages, we can get tremendous income per acre. These are the Eggmobiles, 2 portable hen houses, 12 feet by 20 feet, hooked together like a train. There are 500 birds in each one, and these are black astrolorps, so there's 1,000 birds here. These are non-hybrid, old American variety, but we move these birds every day to a fresh spot behind the cows. So the cows are in, they drop their manure, which becomes an incubator for pathogens and parasites. So the chickens, the birds, follow the cows in the rotation, just like birds in nature, like the egret on the rhino's nose. It's a symbiotic relationship. The birds sanitize behind the herbivores. And so every morning we move the chickens about, we keep them about 3 to 4 days behind the cows because that's the fly cycle. They spread the cow patties into the ground to stimulate nutrient cycling. As a byproduct of sanitizing the pastures, they just lay eggs, and that turns a liability into an asset. They turn grasshoppers, crickets, and all the things that would be negatives into a cash product, and it's all ecologically friendly, and it makes a great place for a chicken to live. So while everybody else is spending thousands of dollars shooting their cows up with grubicides and wormers and systemic parasiticides that make the meat so bad it kills all the bugs, we just collect thousands of dollars worth of eggs as a byproduct of the pasture sanitation program. So these chickens are laying in nest boxes that are accessible from the outside. We'll open this up and see where the chickens are working here. And each of these individual nests has eggs in it. Of course, we gather them once a day, but these are the cash value that those chickens are taking, all of the parasites and the grubs and the crickets and the grasshoppers, and turning them into cash. And so that what's beautiful about this is that we can show how we can make taking care of our environment and the ecological principles make economic sense. And that's always been my contention, that the best ecology is always also the best economics. And so the chickens are doing all the work and enjoying it, and it makes the world's best egg as a byproduct. As an example of how the chickens scratch through the cow patties, eat out the fly larvae, and spread the cow patties into the ground, we have one right here that's a good example. And you can see here how the chickens have scratched through it, and they have sanitized it. It's spread wide. The chickens have even left their calling card to show that they have been here on the middle of it. But this is a perfect picture of the symbiosis and the synergism that occurs when we have multiple complementary species working together rather than buying in pharmaceuticals and toxic materials from outside. We're letting animals do the work in a complementary way, and it makes environmental, ecological, and economic sense. On the Eggmobile, of course, when we move it every day, it's important to think of efficiency. If we're going to have 1,000 chickens here out in the fields, we need to think of efficiency. So again, we have over 300 feet of water line on here. This is a 3/8-inch air hose, which we can get a lot more of that on one of these little reels than you can a garden hose. So we can plumb that into our water system line, and then that just goes to a little float valve on a water pan that keeps nice fresh water in front of the chickens all day long, and everything stays clean and there's no water to carry. Very, very efficient and very animal friendly and clean and hygienic. In the morning, after I move the Eggmobile, all that I have to do for chores is, of course, we carry a lot of feed here on these barrels, and each Eggmobile carries a half a ton of feed with it. So all I have to do is dip a little feed and put it in a supplemental feeder inside. After moving them in the morning, then of course we hook up the water system, and then we dip out some feed and give the feed in an extra feeder because they need additional linear footage. Because a chicken's metabolism is so high, they need a lot of linear footage so that many of them can belly up to it at the same time. Of course, this feed is grain that's non-genetically engineered. We get it from local farmers right here. And so we give them feed, and then we open up the nest boxes, which have been closed up during the night so the chickens don't roost in there, because wherever a chicken roosts, she drops her calling card, and we don't want that soiling on the eggs. So it keeps the eggs cleaner. So we have to open those nest boxes so the birds can get in. Now in the evening, when the chickens all go in, they all go in as it starts to get dark because they're afraid of predators and things. We come up and pull off the ramp and just drop the door and latch it. And now the chickens are protected from predators for the night, and they're locked in so that we can move them wherever we need to move them so they'll function behind the cows like they're supposed to. We have a feeder, a self feeder, hanging on the back of the Eggmobile so that it holds 1,000 pounds of feed, and the feed just tumbles down as the chickens eat out of it, and this way it self-feeds them for about 3 weeks at a time and reduces chore time. The asset of the Eggmobile, of course, is that it produces our best, our highest quality egg at the cheapest cost. And each one of these houses will net 20 bucks a day, net. That's $40 a day, times 7 days a week is $280 a week, net, off of just this. We don't know that we have the completely right combination, but the basic idea is one of symbiosis and synergism. Again, multiple use on the landscape. We have 4 quadrants. It's a 1/4 acre, so each quadrant is a 1/16 of an acre. It's 100 feet by 100 feet, and each quadrant is 50 by 50. And each quadrant then has 12 grapevines growing in it, which are protected by wire screen. And then what we do is we run the turkeys in here, and the trellis poles that hold up the grapes act as a pole also to hold up the netting up above us to keep predators from coming in, to protect the young turkeys. These turkeys are not too far from being dressed, and we move them from quadrant to quadrant as they progress. That the animals harvest the grass, they essentially mow it and fertilize it and debug it, sanitize it for the grapes. As the grapes grow up taller and bigger, they will provide shade and shelter for whatever animals we have in here. But the turkeys have not touched the grapevines, even though we've pushed them kind of hard experimentally just to see if they will eat the leaves, and they don't seem to. So it seems like turkeys are going to be a good combination here. But the whole idea here is that in this 1/4 acre, as the combination comes out right, we should, with the combination of rabbits, or maybe not rabbits at all, just the turkeys and just the vineyard, maybe something small like lambs, eventually. But the idea is that with the combination of things, this 1/4 acre should net $4,000 to $5,000 per year. And when you can net $4,000 to $5,000 a year on a 1/4 acre, that is extremely intensive production. And of course, everything working together keeps it clean, sanitary, fertilized, and an enjoyable place to work. There are significant differences between raising the turkeys and raising the broilers. The main differences, to start, of course, the poults are a lot more expensive than the little broiler chicks. But beyond that, the poults require more heat. They're much more fragile to get started than the chicks. And so in the brooding house, we need to keep the temperature just a little bit hotter, and be much more cautious about no breezes. Just ventilation, yes, but no direct breezes on the poults. We use little cardboard rings, so there are no corners. We really have to baby them more than the little chicks. They stay in longer in the brooder. They stay in, instead of just staying in for 14 to 15, 16 days, they stay in a full 4 weeks. And at 4 weeks then, they can come out in the broiler pens for 3 or 4 weeks, and then they can come either in the broiler pens or maybe in a barn or some sort of a protected shelter. But they're still very vulnerable at 4 weeks. They'll still drown in a afternoon thunderstorm in July just as easy as anything. So you gotta be very careful about putting them out too early. And then along about week 8, it seems like the turkey goes into overdrive, and then you can't kill them with a stick. Once they get to this stage, they just seem almost completely invulnerable to anything weather that you can throw at them. And so then when they get big, though, they do like to range a lot more than the broilers. And so putting them in this situation allows them a lot more freedom, a lot more range, a lot more bugs and grazing, and then we can just move them through these quadrants and graze them with more area. We raise the turkeys. We normally dress them to about 16 weeks, and that gives us about anywhere from a 13 to a 16-pound carcass. We found that there are customers who like a carcass over 20 pounds, but most people don't know what to do with a turkey over 20 pounds. Most people want about a 13, 14, 15-pound turkey. 8 pounds is really too small to let the turkey enjoy its full physiological expression. So 16 weeks is about what we try to run them. And another big difference is that their feed, when they start, these poults need 28% protein. Chicks are perfectly happy at 18, 19%. So we beef up the ration quite a lot with roasted soybean meal, and we feed them a lot of boiled eggs, cracked eggs from our feather nets and the egg mobiles and things like that. We just hard boil them and just mash them and throw them in pans in the brooder house, and that way the chickens get this, the turkeys, the little poults get this wonderful supplement to bolster their protein, and you can pretty much give them all of that they want. The other final big difference is they need a lot of grit. Chickens, minimal grit, we get them started and that's about enough, but the turkeys actually need heavy, big rocks the size of marbles for their digestion and for proper work of their gizzard. But the one big advantage of the turkey, of course, they are seasonal. They tend to grow most of them for the Thanksgiving market. But beyond that, the processing is much simpler because you're dealing with a much larger animal doing about the same thing. We can't go as fast numerically, but we can go about twice as fast on poundage. And since you're getting paid on poundage, the turkeys become much more efficient in processing. So even though the production end is twice as long, cash flow is harder, they're harder to start and all that, still they end up being just as lucrative and economically beneficial as chickens, in as much as the processing is twice as efficient. So we enjoy the turkeys, and our customers certainly do, and we produce somewhere between 500 and 1,000 turkeys a year, and we produce them starting early in the spring and produce them year-round along with the broilers, because we have customers that like turkey more than chicken, and so we have them then year-round for folks. Once the turkeys hit about 10 weeks to this indestructible stage, then we can move them out in a pretty open weather type situation, a range type situation, like the binary here. Daily requirements here, basically keep some feed in the feeders, make sure these buckets have water in them. Of course, they're the same ones that are in the broiler pens. The water just comes down gravity fed. And other than that, the turkeys are pretty much on their own to move around and eat whatever grass they want, eat the feed they want, and just continue to grow up and get fatter. When we talk about grass growth, the grass growth cycle, the nutrient cycle in the pasture, the whole thing keys on timing and access of the animals and the multitude of different animals to the grass sward. For example, we're right now in a paddock that the cows had grazed just 3 days ago. And if you'll notice in the ruler, this grass is relatively short. And the cut level was right here at this spot. So now it has sent forth these new shoots. Well, obviously, these shoots, which are roughly 2 inches long in 3 days, these shoots are very grazable. If we graze these shoots before they have replaced the energy in the roots that was expended in sending forth the shoots, and of course they're going to replace the energy with, photosynthetically, if we regraze this too early, we're going to weaken that grass plant. And so that's why we only want to allow the cattle to graze one time and then move them off so that they can't regraze before that plant reaches energy equilibrium and becomes weaker. In good growing conditions, after only about a week to 10 days, the grass really begins to kick in its exponential growth curve. It starts to hit that, what we call the adolescent growth cycle, and this is the very beginning of it here. And of course, you notice the ground becomes covered more, and the energy equilibrium gets replaced in those plants. And if we graze that grass too early, of course, we're going to weaken it. And if we wait until it gets that energy replaced, the growth will be exponentially more productive and will actually collect far more solar energy per square foot than we would if we allowed the animals continuous access so they continued to nip the grass in its infancy. Once the grass has regrown enough to replace that energy in the roots, it is actually ready to graze. And once it hits about 6, 7, 8 inches, it depends, different species, it's a different amount, but the principle is what's important. The principle is that every species has a growth curve, a biological S growth curve. We don't want to graze infant grass, and we don't want to let it get so old that it turns into dormancy and lignifies. If we graze it at its most nutritional level, it will also be at its most productive state. It will be sequestering the most carbon. It will be replacing the most energy in the roots. It will have collected the most solar energy. And it will be the most efficient for the cow to graze, because the cow likes to harvest about 4 to 6 inches per mouthful. And so all of these wonderful factors kick in when we only allow limited access and the appropriate amount of rest period between the grazing cycles. When we talk about salad bar, what we're talking about is a perennial polyculture. Now if you look here, for example, here's some orchard grass. This is fescue. This is some Carolina nightshade. Here's red clover. Here's white clover. Here's some narrow leaf plantain, which is a medic, a blood cleanser, if you will. There's some narrow dock here, a little bit of dock weed. And here's some Queen Anne's lace, or wild carrot. It's considered a weed, but when it's like this, it's extremely tender, and the cows will eat it like cotton candy. So here, in my hand now, I'm holding this multiplicity of species, and there are probably more here that I can't see. But you notice that it's highly vegetative, and this is, of course, what we're trying to feed the cows, the chickens, and everything else is what we call an adolescent type, a puberty quality, young, vegetative, virile, healthy, nutritious salad bar. It's fresh every day. The cows get it every day. The chickens get it every day. And when it's in this vegetative state, they eat a tremendous amount of it because of its highly palatable, it's It's all ice cream. And every one of these different plants fills a different niche above the ground, below the ground, and the animal's nutritional profile. So the diversity and the polyculture is all part of that healthy ecosystem below the ground, above the ground, and the diet that we eat. Our water system comes from a pond at the foot of the mountain, and that gravity feeds, so there's no electric pumps, there's no pressure tanks or anything like that. It just comes by gravity down here to where we use it for the livestock. We use it for the pigs, for the chickens, for the cattle, for anything, you know, anything that happens down here at the farm. We have about 3 miles of 3/4 inch polyethylene black plastic pipe, and every 200 feet is a T with a little $1 hardware store valve. So we have 80 pounds of static pressure, 80 psi water every few feet anywhere on the farm. So you just open up a valve and you've got pressurized water anywhere.